Alright, so we're going to take a look at that project 7.2 on page 181, and we're going to do it in two parts so I can make sure I don't make too big of a video that I can't get uploaded to YouTube and then do you any good. Alright, so at the top of the page here, this is just a simple Word document so I can enter some stuff as necessary or point it out. You were given this IP address, 192.42.53.12, and you were supposed to create 6 subnets. And the two requirements, this is copied and pasted right from the Angel site. Give me the subnet IDs, the host range for each subnet, and the broadcast address for each subnet. And use the format that you saw on page 166. And in addition to that, you had to also tell me what the new subnet mask would be, and not simply the default mask, because at this point of doing subnetting, you should know some basics, or you just can't subnet. Alright, so I want to go over some of the basics. Maybe it'll help you to understand. Maybe it'll be a review. Maybe you'll find it boring because you already know the stuff. Alright, so however it applies to you, decide to go on. Alright, so I look at this address that we're given here. And the first question I ask myself is, well, what class is this address? Well, we know it's a class C by looking at the first octet. I'll say that differently. You look at the first octet and you decide what number it is to decide what class range it fits into. And 192 fits into the class C range. So that establishes the IP address as a class C address. That's a fact. There's no changing it. The next thing I ask myself, what are the network and host fields? And I abbreviate them N or H. So out of the 4 octets, what does the information mean? For that class C, it simply means network.network.network.host, or in other words, the first 3 octets are network information and the last one is host information. I have to remember that in order to be able to do this stuff. Alright, and the third thing I would ask myself is, what is the default subnet mask? Sometimes it's just referred to as the mask, you know, the short term. So the default mask in the case of this class C address is 255.255.255.0, or in Cedar notation /24. And the 24, if you may recall, represents the number of ones, and I've got it typed out here in the binary, in binary, so you can see what that looks like. That entire 32-bit subnet mask for a class C network looks like this. The 255.255.255.0 is the dotted decimal notation representation of this 32-bit number. All these ones create the 255, and these create the next 255, and so forth. So there are 24 ones here. It's important to know the masks, because if you don't know the mask, then, or the default mask, then you can't subnet because you don't know where you're borrowing from. Alright, so let's do some basic binary to decimal translation just to see how you are there. I'm just going to pick one octet, and I've got one here, and it's these 8 zeros in a row. Well, if you recall what each position is worth when you are translating from binary to decimal, each one of these positions is worth this amount. If you can understand that each one of these numbers with a hyphen between it represents each place value, right? You just have to add up where you see the ones, right? Sum them. So there's no ones here, so they're all 0. So all zeros is going to equal 0 in dotted decimal. Just like the 0 was up here at the end of the mask, and that represented 8 zeros here. All right, my next number, I have a single bit set, and it's right here, the third position from the left, and the third position from the left is worth 32. So I have really nothing to add because I have a single bit there. So in dotted decimal, it's worth 32. All right, let's look at a third one here. This one has, out of the 8 bits, it has 2 bits that are set to 1. The high order bit, right, the most significant digit in the number is set. That's worth 128. And the third one down, we know, is worth 32. So we add 128 and 32, and we get 160. 160 is what the dotted decimal notation would be for that octet. All right? And the fourth one, I have 4 bits that are set to 1 and 4 that are set to 0. So I find the bit position of the 4, and the first one lies in the 32. The next one lies in the 8, and the last two are 2 and 1. And when you add those up, they should add up to 43. And so this number in binary is represented by 43 in the dotted decimal notation method. Okay, so let's go back to our address one more time that we were working with. The 192.42.53.12 is just a random IP address. You had to look at it and say, this is a Class C address, and its fields are network, 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 host. So that means that the 3 numbers that make up the network fields were 192.42.53, and the host field was .12. All right. Now, before we continue with that IP address, you have to know this fact, just like you have to know many other facts about the IP addresses. There's 3 different types of IP addresses, or I'm sorry, 3 different types of addresses that are pretty basic that you should be familiar with. And those are network, host, sometimes called a node, and the broadcast address. You should know how to recognize them, which means you can also create them. Let me say that again. You should be able to recognize them, and if you can, then you can also create them. So the network address is anything that has all zeros in the host field. If you take our IP address and you consider that .12 is the host field, and I put a 0 in the host field, that's just creating the network ID. The broadcast address, I jump right over there, and that's any address that has all 1s in the host field. Well, again, the host field is at the end. If I put all binary 1s in there, that translates to 255, right? So my broadcast address is, let me get rid of that and put in the 255. There's my broadcast address. My host range is everything in between. So after 0, the first number is 1. And I can count all the way up to 254. And the next one after that is 255. All right, so to sum this up, that IP address that we were given actually belongs to this range. The network ID is this. The broadcast address is this. And there's only 1 of each of those. And the host range is 192.42.53.1 all the way up to 254. So there are 254 of them available. All right? So I hope that this was a good review, and maybe you picked up a couple of things from it. In part 2, I'll go into the actual subnetting. All right? Thanks for watching. I hope this did some good.